So hello everybody, thanks for tuning in today, and thank you of course to iGaming Next for having us on. Well, I'm actually quite glad to say that it's still warm in Malta, so we can do without an actual fireplace here, but still it is good to have a fireside chat now and again. Even more so if, like me, you have a great conversation partner to chat with. I've recently watched David Letterman on Netflix, and the show they are currently showing is called Needs No Introduction. And I actually feel that fits quite well to who I will be talking to today, because Sissel Weitzhandler has been a key player in the industry for years. He is the Chief Compliance Officer of Play and Go and heads one of the most respected compliance teams in the industry. I myself am Jessica Maier, Chief Risk Officer, Head of Legal and Compliance at Push Gaming, and I recently joined Push, having formerly been a partner at a German law firm specializing in gaming law. So, hi Sissel.
Hi, very nice to be here.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, and thank you, iGaming Next, for this opportunity.
So our topic today is keeping gambling safe, fair, and fun, which means that we'll be talking about social responsibility and measures to prevent gambling harm. Usually the discussions about social responsibility and tools to promote responsible gambling tend to focus on the B2C perspective, as it's the operators who have the direct relationship and interact directly with the players. Today, we as suppliers are talking about this topic, and we're seeing a lot more of these similar discussions recently. So, Sissel, let me ask you, why is this? Is it because suppliers are only just starting to think about the role in protecting players?
And no, the topic is not really new. Is that it's not only the operators that has an interest in promoting responsible gaming, and social responsibility is and has been at the very heart of our business. And we of course don't design games to appeal to problem gamblers, but to entertain. And I think the reason why we are talking more about this now generally is due to the fact that regulators are increasingly focusing on supplier licensing as well as game-related regulations, which of course means there is an opportunity for us now to share our experiences and knowledge in the field.
So, like for example, in the UK, then in the recent consultation, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, what was your involvement in that?
Well, our involvement was that we, like everybody else, of course, was invited to contribute to the consultation process itself, and we also had the opportunity to meet with the Commission and talk through a number of their proposals, and also give feedback on our concerns as well. So they gave us a great opportunity to share our thoughts and insights, and for that we're very full, of course. Yeah.
So what were some of those concerns about?
Our concerns is, of course, we are all for raising standards and preventing problem gambling. There's no doubt about that at all. But we do feel that a number of the proposals that there seems to lack research, and the existing research just doesn't distinguish enough between the different player groups, age groups in the assessment, and whether restrictions are really appropriate and actually meets the objective of preventing harm. So I don't feel that there's enough reliable evidence to conclude that necessarily game feature related restrictions the focus on game design really achieve that goal. So of course, there was a couple of us that were clear that that we for sure back, but which is generally, I think that we want restrictions to be more evidence-based and measurable, and implemented where possible gradually, so that we can see which restrictions actually achieve the intended. And when you sort of apply restrictions and that many restrictions across the board, it and that, I must say, doesn't include only game design and social supplier responsibilities, but it's of course largely the operators that bear the brunt of this. But all of these changes combined in a very short period of time, which has been the last couple of years and continues going forward, it makes it difficult to measure the effect. On the other hand, it's super important also to mention that the Gambling Commission, in that situation, there is a lot of dialogue, there is numerous consultations, and we have a chance to be heard. And it's clear that's not really what can be said for every jurisdiction. And in this respect, I am thinking about one specific recent example, which is Germany. And I am sure, as a German, and having represented a German law firm, I'm sure that you can add 1 or 2 points about that.
Yeah, definitely. Germany is a very good example for that. Yeah, maybe some background there. So the German states obviously agreed on a new law back in March this year. And what was particularly new about that law was that it was, and that is clear positive, is that it seeks to get rid of the prohibition that is in the current law. And so there will be licensing of slot games in the future. What is also very obvious in the new law and how it was drafted is that it's full. Well, I would call it full of it's like seemingly player protecting measures. I say seemingly because the lack of research that you mentioned is very obvious in the German example. There was no consultation or no noticeable or official consultation with the industry, players, even no apparent consultation with other regulators, which already have experience with licensing regimes, which could be consulted or talked to get their insights, their experiences with having an actual regulated licensed market. There are no signs of that, and not even the German regulator, because we have one state in Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, which has had a gambling regulation for years, and it doesn't seem that any experiences or evidence derived from those years of licensing and sort of monitoring that those licensees has really fed into the new law and was used in the drafting process for this new Germany-wide regulation. So what we're left with is a feeling of this is a law that might be more based on assumptions rather than evidence. And if we look at that, like if I think of an example, autoplay is something that the future law will not allow. And actually the Schleswig-Holstein regulation did allow for it, but so the future law doesn't. And the reasoning given is that autoplay has the risk of actually enticing players to play more or lose track of their gaming. But then there is no research or evidence to back that up in the supporting documentation to the law. And I would argue that autoplay could also be seen as a tool that players, or at least some players, could use actually to control their gambling. They can set a predefined number of spins. how much they are willing to play for and what they're going to lose, right?
Yes.
And
one could even maybe say that the lack of or restricting autoplay would even increase the thrill of gambling.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least it's something that research would be welcomed using real data.
Yeah.
I can say even just for these autoplay, like when looking into this briefly on our side, it's not necessarily that players would opt for the highest amount of auto spins. It's actually more frequently that the players are using lower levels, so on average 50 spin, so auto spins. So again, worth looking into.
Yeah.
I do believe, however, that regulators, like for example in the UK, are very interested in understanding these finer details. We certainly welcome that process, and it's also I think positive that that in Germany, for example, the regulations. One could say that it's at least a start. We have a start now, and there should be, I understand, plans for regularly review the upcoming regulations, and so this should provide some sort of chance to contribute later on and maybe change the direction to a more data-driven approach.
Yeah, and I think sort of what we're seeing a lot of at the minute, at least in Germany, is maybe more politically or emotionally driven decision making and law making. Mm-hmm. And I do think that the way the German law has been drafted shows just how difficult it was for some German states to move away from this total prohibition. It feels that some would still prefer gambling to just simply not exist, and that would sort of be the easier option for them. But that has been the problem all along. That was what the prohibition on gambling was introduced for in the first place, and which is also what has always been called into question from an EU law perspective, because it's unlawfully restricted freedom to provide services of operators. But sort of the more is more kind of approach in terms of more restrictions means more protection, just shows that it's an emotional topic, or can be, and there's a lot of what people think might be good from a player protection perspective. But we'd like to see the evidence. We'd like to see the research that actually backs that up, and certainly something where we can also contribute. So it's not only that the legislators aren't alone in this, or regulators. There is an opportunity to contribute to that. Because if that evidence isn't there, or the research isn't undertaken, then there is, of course, a risk that it will be sort of ultimately worse for players in terms of protecting them, because there's a risk of just the black market benefiting from under-research and not evidence-based regulation.
So did Germany set a goal for generalization, or?
There is no official target goal. I think actually sort of the topic of channelization hasn't played, unfortunately, a major role in this. If it had, I think we would have seen a slightly different regulation, and we're seeing it in Sweden. Channelization rates are going down, and that is certainly something we don't want to see, and is concerning. If there is regulation, industry embraces it, and then you see the players actually looking for other routes to gamble. That is a big concern, and it goes against the whole idea of regulation, of which channelization is, of course, a major part. And for Germany, I think it will actually be interesting to see how the recently introduced transitional regulation, how that will pan out. That could almost be like a first sounding board for how the players will take this new regulation. Actually, on that, I mean, I know both of our companies have managed to implement the transitional requirements, and yeah, but like I can hear you laughing. So let's. Can you share like what it's been like sort of the past few weeks and months? So like what were the challenges in that? What did you see like from a game design and RG context?
It's been challenging to say the least. I think one of the most challenging things has been that, although we want to do right by the regulations just hasn't been clear. And in other markets, like a number of other markets, you have authorities that can advise. In this situation, there is no regulator that is really taking charge, and even the private firms out there were only truly informed only weeks before the final requirements were published. So that was challenging. So we simply had to make certain decisions based on the draft law that had been notified to the EU Commission, which isn't really sufficient. And at least you are in risk of making the wrong decisions, interpreting wrongly. And equally, there has been challenges in terms of the transitional regime, which just didn't align with the draft future law. And you saw that in terms of the coin display requirements and average spin time of 5 seconds. There was a difference between the two frameworks.
Yeah.
And then on a general note, it would have been very helpful if authorities understood a little bit more in this situation specifically on how the industry works, because it doesn't take a day or two to implement changes to content, for example. It does take a long time. It's a big machine. There's a lot of testing, development going into this, specifically like requirements as maximum winning display requirements and average VR ratio for 1 euro stake.
Yeah.
It was tough.
I'm actually looking at the time a bit. We have like 2-3 minutes to go. It would be nice to chat longer, but let's sort of maybe move away from the, say, regulatory action, let's say, to another point, which I think isn't maybe receiving enough attention in the current, that very product-focused discussion. And that is to look at other harm drivers of problem gambling. Problem gambling is a very complex and multi-layered topic, and many factors which will trigger or increase the risk of problem gambling will lie outside of the actual product. So they will be linked to personal circumstances, the situations the player is in, and a goal for me will be to invest resources in player education and supporting help tools aimed at helping players identifying harmful gambling patterns, but also harm drivers which are outside of the game. So, for example, helping the players monitor the situation and moods in which they decide to gamble in the context, though, of their everyday lives. So that could be something. We all have all sorts of lifestyle apps. We have apps tracking how many steps we take every day. We have apps telling us, reminding us to drink water or do more exercise. And I'm thinking of something like that would focus on helping players identify the patterns in their everyday lives and personal circumstances that they could then adapt to and identify the harmful patterns. And we're seeing quite a lot of providers coming up with such tools, which is great. And I think we'll see a lot more of.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree. And I can definitely see opportunities for a lot of strategic partnerships that's going to be formed between different actors in the industry, and we are collaborating closely with customers to further advance behavioral analytics. So and there is no doubt, of course, that we as the industry, as part of the industry, want to protect players from harm as much as possible. Of course, we just don't want to ruin the game for those that play responsibly and enjoy gambling for what we all want it to be, and that is, of course, entertainment. Hopefully, these discussions continue, and we will just see ongoing improvements.
Well, I think a perfect note to end our chat for today, Sissel. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And I guess I'll now be handing over to the next fireside chat. So enjoy.